In a civilized country, the one thing you're absolutely not allowed to do is get creepy with other people's kids. That is not allowed. It's the worst thing. And even now, go ahead and try that in a place where the people have self-respect, like Africa or Eastern Europe. You will get killed, and you will absolutely deserve it. But in this country, where the population has been instructed for decades to hate itself, there is very little resistance, if you think about it, to organized attempts to get sexually creepy with your kids. Porn in school libraries, drag queen story hours, Rachel Levine, the fake admiral posing as a girl, encouraging your boys to, quote, switch genders. It's absolutely everywhere, despite their attempts to tell you that it's not. Of course it is. Look around. Well, Robby Starbuck has noticed. He's just directed a movie about all of this called The War on Children, which is exactly what it is. Here's a clip from the film.
If you watch the news, you've probably heard politicians and pundits saying things like this.
Transgender children are not having surgeries. That's really important to say.
In his tweet, he talked about stopping surgeries for people under 18, which is not a thing. That is not a thing that happened.
There is misinformation presented that somehow that we're doing surgery on minors or even children, and that simply is not true.
So Layla Jane, how old were you when they gave you a double mastectomy?
It was a month after my 13th birthday.
How long was the process before that with the doctors to prepare you for this?
I initially started seeing doctors for my gender dysphoria when I was 12. So it was within that time frame, within a year.
What age were you when they put you on puberty blockers?
I was 12 years old.
12 years old, doctors gave you a drug called Lupron. This drug has been used to chemically castrate sex offenders, pedophiles in prison, but they prescribed it to you to stop your hormones. Is that correct?
Correct.
Again, a healthy society protects its children. That's the whole point of having a society. That's why we have civilization. Otherwise, we just let young men do whatever they want, or the people with guns rule over the rest of us. But we don't do that because we want to protect our children. And when a society ceases to make that a priority, that society ceases to exist. So this is a fight worth having. Robby Starbuck has joined it in earnest, and we are grateful to have him join us now. Robby, thanks so much for coming on. So since you've been marinating in this topic, both on a kind of granular level and high level, what's your top line conclusion about the attempt to sexualize our kids? Like, what is this exactly?
This is a near planetary scale psychological operation to usher in a new form of communism. And I know to some people that might sound extreme, but you know, to give a little insight, my family came from Cuba, where communism happened in a flash. And I don't think a lot of Americans realize just how quickly this can happen. And we're well down the path. I would call it probable at this point. You know, we're fighting as hard as we can to make sure that it doesn't happen. But when the opposition party that is, you know, the quote ruling class owns every cultural institution, and, you know, you've essentially got children locked into their indoctrination centers for more time than they spend with their parents or their religious leaders, you know, the outcome is truly horrific. You know, what we just watched with Layla Jane, the way I was raised, it would have been considered barbarism, and the appropriate result would have been the death penalty for any adults involved in the mutilation of the child. But we veered into this territory where people are sleepwalking, and that's why we made this film, because really, truly, adults in America needed to be shaken awake.
Why would you allow your own children to be destroyed and mutilated? What's the thinking, do you think?
Well, in this mass psychological operation, a lot of it has actually played out in a way where it's influenced the parents as well to believe that there's something wrong with them if they question this, that, you know, they're some kind of, you know, ideologue that's insane if they are not okay with their child suddenly deciding they're a different gender. And, you know, on the flip side of this, you've also got states like California, where we highlight in the film this child named Jaylee, where her mom refused to transition her. So you've got these parents who do step up, and what does the state do? They crush them. She had her child stolen from her, and then in state care, Jaylee ended up committing suicide. So when another parent sees that, and they see that the state will take action against you if you oppose it, if you live in one of those states, and you're trapped in some job and you feel like you can't leave, a lot of them feel like there's no other option but to go along with it. And sadly, you know, we've got to build up a culture that really defends these children and produces parents who are brave enough to be warriors for these kids.
And I think warrior is the word. I mean, if you can't use force in defense of your own children, then obviously, you're not free and your children don't belong to you.
My whole life I've heard politicians say this is the most important election in history, and it's always bullshit. But in this case, it genuinely is true. This is the breaking point. You don't save the next generation right now. They will become the future voters and the future leaders of tomorrow, and they will be fully indoctrinated into this cult. This is a cult. This ideology will break this country and everything our founders and ancestors built. Okay, and that's not just this country. That's goodness. That's virtues. It's about humanity. What is inside of us? What are we willing to do to tell the difference between right and wrong and to stand and really stand for something as a human being? Because we're lacking that. Our soul is tattered right now, not just as a country, but as the human race. That's why I said this is an almost planetary scale operation. And you see it all over the West. You see it in the permissiveness of immigration. You see it in the permissiveness of sexualizing our kids.
We're at sort of an end stage now. This has been going on for a long time, and you tied it to immigration, I think, correctly. And maybe the thing this topic and immigration have in common is that we're unable to defend ourselves from invasion or from sex crimes being perpetrated against our kids. These are sex crimes against our kids. And our self-defense mechanism seems to have been disabled as a society and as individuals. How did that happen? Thanks a lot for watching us on X. There is a lot more to see, and you can find it on tuckercarlson.com. We hope you'll join us.